hope you're enjoying this wireframing process. Of course, in the previous lesson, I wasn't being very careful, was I? I was just throwing down rectangles really quickly just to kind of introduce you to the concept of wireframing. But of course, in the real world, I want to be as precise as possible with things like the dimensions of objects or maybe where I'm positioning things inside my layout. I might need those values later on when I start building out my design, when I start coding out CSS, for instance, right? So what we want to do is we want to start getting much more precise with our layout. And I'm going to introduce you to two panels here in Illustrator that I use all the time whenever I'm working on my layouts. We have the Transform panel and we also have the Align panel. And if you've worked with Illustrator in the past, no doubt you've seen these guys in action. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with the rectangle, that first rectangle that we created way up in the top left corner. And I mentioned in the previous lesson that this fella represents the logo for our website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab the Transform panel now. So I'm going to head up to the window menu and head all the way down to Transform. There he is. He's buried in there. And you'll notice inside the Transform panel, we have all kinds of numbers, all kinds of values. If you've never used this guy before, here's the down and dirty tour. On the left-hand side, we have the width and height of the currently selected object, all in pixels because that's the unit of measurement that we set. And over on the left-hand side, we have X and Y values. Do you know about X and Y values? Positioning values? I'll show you those guys in just a second. And then below that, we have a value there for the rotation angle and also the shear angle. Two options that I hardly ever use, but they are there if I need them. Okay, so I have the logo object selected. Now what I want to do is I want to be much more precise. I want to set a precise dimension for this fella. So I'm going to start off by selecting the content of the width field there in the, I guess you could say the top right corner of the Transform panel. And I'm simply going to type in 210, so it's going to be 210 pixels. And then hit Tab on your keyboard, and two things happen. Number one, the object that we have selected down on our artboard scales appropriately. And the second thing that happens is we are now moved into the height field. So we can type in the height, which for me is going to be 110, right? Hit Enter and lock in those values. There we go. So as we go along, as we start building out our wireframing, we might use the Transform panel more and more just to keep everything nice and tight, nice and precise, and so on. Now, as far as the X and Y values go, I mentioned that this relates to the positioning of your object on the artboard. We have this area here way over on the left-hand side, which is referred to as the reference point. Now, what this means is the reference point on the object. Now, this gets a little bit tricky to try and explain, but what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to click on the box in the top left corner. This fella here, you can see mine's filled in with black. I've already clicked on him. So what this means is that the X and Y values that I now set will be the relationship between the top left corner of the object, because that's what I set here, and the top left corner of the artboard. Now, to give you a quick example, and again, this is for those that have never seen this before. If I set 0 and 0 for my X and Y values, what happens, and let me just scroll down here a little bit, is the object is now tucked right up into that top left corner, right? So I've said I want no space between the top left corner of the object and the top left corner of the artboard, right? Or it could be 100 pixels, or it could be 50 pixels, or whatever the design calls for, right? My design happens to call for an X and Y value of 10 pixels each. So go ahead and type in 10 for both X and Y, and now the object is sitting 10 pixels off the top of the artboard and 10 pixels in from the left edge of the artboard. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I'm going to throw some more values at you here. I'm going to go ahead and grab my menu, this fella here. And let's see, his width actually is supposed to span the entire width of our layout, which is 960 pixels, if you'll recall. So I'm going to go ahead and set that value. And then I'm going to have to go and reposition this guy. Maybe I'll move him up here just a little bit. His X value, by the way, would be 0. I neglected to mention this. X is horizontal, Y is vertical, right? Y is up and down, X is left and right, if that makes sense. Okay, so make sure the X value on that guy is set to 0, and then you may need to reposition your menu there, as I have to do there as well. And then finally, this sort of largish rectangle down here, which is going to serve as the slideshow. His dimensions here really quickly. We're going to set this guy to 840 pixels in width by 305 pixels in height, something like that. Okay? All right, wonderful stuff. Now, I want to show you the Align panel here as well very quickly. And again, if you've worked with Illustrator before, you've no doubt worked with the Align panel. The Align panel happens to be tucked in behind the Transform panel. Go ahead and grab them there. If you don't see your Align panel there, by the way, once again, make a trip to the window menu and look for Align. And what I want to do is I want to pop open the Align palette menu over in the top right corner, and I want to click on Show Options. And that's going to give me some options here down towards the bottom. Now, what I want to do here, I should probably fill you in on exactly what I'm after here, is I want to take this slideshow box that I've created, and I want to center it in the middle of my layout. And I also want to make sure that my menu is centered inside the layout as well. So what I'm going to do, I'll start off with the slideshow container, the slideshow box, select him. And then in the bottom right corner of the Align panel, we have this Align to. Make sure you're set to Align to Artboard. Now, I'm constantly, by the way, flipping between Align to Selection and Align to Artboard, back and forth, depending on what it is that I'm trying to do. Here, I'm trying to align an object to the artboard, the document. So make sure you're set to Align to Artboard. And then what I'll do is I'll click on this guy right here, Horizontal Align Center. Just a single click there. That's all it takes. And now this object is centered inside the document. I'll just zoom out a little bit there if you want to see that. Okay, perfect. Now I might want to nudge him up just by using my arrow keys on my keyboard, maybe something like this. Right, just kind of push him up there. Or I could hold down Shift and I could drag up on the object with the black arrow tool. Could do that as well. Now I'm basically going to do the same thing with my menu. I'm going to grab the menu. I don't have to set Align to. He's already still set to Align to Artboard, which is great. And I'm going to hit the same icon, Horizontal Align Center, just like that. So now I know that this object and this object are all nicely centered inside the layout.